thousands of veterans miss out on benefits they're actually eligible for, and, many don't even realize it. Or worse, billions in funding meant for those benefits could just evaporate back into the government before it ever reaches the veteran community. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Veterans Briefing.
Glad to be here for this one. It's an important topic.
It really is. Today, we are opening up a massive stack of sources to figure out exactly why so much critical legislation is frozen in Washington right now. We're doing a deep dive into the July 29th Senate floor transcripts, the Congressional Budget Office's official funding rulings, and the VA's proposed administrative updates to their rating schedules.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
It's a massive amount of information. Our mission for this deep dive is to connect the dots. We want to show you exactly how a stalled legislative package connects directly to the VA's upcoming rating changes for common conditions like, sleep apnea and tinnitus. And most importantly, what this legislative gridlock actually means for you and your family.
Right, and it is just so crucial that we cut through the noise on this particular issue. I mean, if you spend any time on veteran forums right now, you are seeing a lot of rumors swirling of benefits being actively taken away to pay for new laws.
Oh, yeah, I see that everywhere online.
Exactly. And that creates just a massive amount of unnecessary fear. What we need to do today is isolate the legislative reality. We are going to focus purely on the structural mechanics of what is actually happening on the Senate floor.
We're getting down to the actual facts.
Right. Why the funding is legally stalled and what the VA is actually required to do moving forward. This is urgent, practical information for anyone currently navigating the system.
So let's start by looking at what is actually at stake here, because the legislation we're talking about is massive. It's called the Take Care of America's Veterans Act. But looking through the text of this, it isn't just a standard single-issue bill.
No, not at all.
It reads more like a highly targeted strike against the penalties of service. It combines over 60 separate pieces of legislation into one master blueprint.
Yeah, that thematic framing of penalties is really the best way to look at it.
Yeah.
The Senate Veterans Affairs Committee essentially took a whole bunch of widely supported, deeply necessary initiatives that have just been trapped in legislative limbo for years.
Trapped is a very good word for it.
It is, right. And they bundled them together. The goal is to get all these systemic fixes over the finish line in one single bipartisan swing.
And the undisputed heavyweight in this package is the Major Richard Starr Act. I mean, this is a bill that has had the backing of almost every single senator, yet it has been stalled in Congress for 6 long years.
6 years, yeah.
For anyone who hasn't tracked the history of this, the Major Richard Starr Act is trying to fix a deeply embedded penalty regarding concurrent receipt, specifically for Chapter 61 combat-injured retirees.
And the fact that this requires a legislative fix at all is deeply frustrating for advocates. I mean, right now, due to laws that essentially date back to 19th century provisions against double dipping from the federal government, medically retired, combat-disabled veterans are heavily penalized.
Double dipping, right.
Yeah. They are legally barred from receiving both their full VA disability compensation and their earned Department of Defense retirement pay simultaneously. Basically, $1 of VA compensation offsets $1 of DoD retirement pay.
Which is mathematically absurd when you think about what those two pools of money actually represent. I mean, the DoD pension is vested compensation for years of military service, right?
Exactly.
Well, the VA disability check is compensation for lifelong physical or mental injury sustained during that service. They were two completely different things.
Two completely separate buckets.
Yeah, yet the current law forces combat-injured retirees to forfeit money out of their own pockets. The Major Richard Starr Act finally abolishes that offset.
It corrects that injustice by allowing them to receive both earned benefits concurrently. But, that is just one facet of the penalties this package addresses. You also have the Love Lives On Act, which tackles a penalty levied against surviving spouses.
Oh, right, the age restriction thing.
Right. Under current regulations, a surviving spouse of a fallen service member can actually lose their dependency and indemnity compensation. And those are the survivor benefits they rely on to feed their families.
Wow.
Yeah, they can lose it if they choose to remarry before the age of 55.
It essentially places a financial penalty on moving forward and, trying to rebuild a life after a devastating tragedy. So the Love Lives On Act removes that age restriction.
It does.
And then you have bills in this package targeting systemic access gaps, like the Veteran Access Act and the Sher-Briley and Eric Edmondson Veteran Benefit Expansion Act.
Yeah, and those are critical for modernizing care. The Veteran Access Act specifically targets rapid intervention for mental health care and suicide prevention. And crucially, it forces the expansion of that access out into rural community care networks.
Because not everyone lives next to a massive VA hospital.
Exactly. We know that a 3-hour drive to a major VA medical center is just not a viable lifeline for a veteran in a crisis.
Absolutely not.
The Expansion Act then builds on that by increasing compensation structures for veterans with severe, complex, service-connected disabilities, ensuring their caregivers and families have stronger support systems.
So when you look at all 60-plus bills together, it's not just tweaking the margins here. It's an attempt to pass an entire generation's worth of priorities. Combat retirees, surviving spouses, rural mental health access. It really covers the entire spectrum of the veteran experience.
It really does, yeah.
Which brings us to the massive roadblock. If basically everyone in Washington agrees this is the right thing to do and has overwhelming bipartisan sponsorship, why has it been frozen for 6 years? This hits the PAYGO wall, right?
Yes, the infamous PAYGO wall.
As I understand it, PAYGO is basically a federal zero-sum game. If you want to create a new dollar for veteran entitlements, you are legally required to find a dollar in the couch cushions somewhere else in the federal budget.
That is exactly the structural reality of Washington. The Statutory Pay-As-You-Go Act of 2010, or PAYGO, is strictly enforced by the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO. It dictates that any new legislation creating or expanding mandatory spending must be completely offset. You cannot deficit spend to fund new entitlement programs.
Meaning you can't just put it on the national credit card.
Exactly. If this massive veteran package costs billions of dollars over the next decade, lawmakers have to explicitly prove to the CBO where those exact billions are coming from before the bill can even be brought to a vote.
So Senator Richard Blumenthal, the ranking member of the committee, recently tried to find that couch cushion money. During the July floor debate, she proposed funding this entire veteran package using unobligated funds from the Department of Defense.
Which sounded like a great idea at the time.
Right. Basically DOD money that Congress previously authorized, but the military hasn't actually spent yet. On paper, the DOD budget is astronomical, so it seems like a very logical place to look.
It does, yeah.
The CBO rejected it. Why did they call strike 3 on using the DOD money? What is the actual mechanism that blocked this?
It comes down to a strict classification mismatch in federal accounting. The CBO rejected the proposal because unobligated DOD funds are classified as discretionary spending.
Okay.
However, expanding veteran benefits under this package creates a permanent mandatory spending requirement. Under PAYGO rules, you are legally prohibited from using discretionary savings to pay for a new mandatory entitlement program.
Because it's like trying to pay your 30-year permanent mortgage using a one-time Christmas bonus from work. The long-term mathematical obligations just don't match up.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. The CBO acts as the impartial umpire here. They looked at the accounting, applied the PAYGO statute, and formally verified that you cannot legally use those specific DOD funds to offset the Take Care of America's Veterans Act.
Which means Senator Blumenthal's attempt to bypass the funding gridlock was totally rejected, bringing everything back to square one.
Back to the drawing board.
Right. Without a valid offset, without a piggy bank that the CBO actually approves of, all 60 pieces of legislation remain completely frozen. And, we should mention, if you're finding these discussions helpful, please subscribe to Veterans Briefing so you never miss important updates and practical information for veterans and their families. Okay, so if the discretionary DOD money doesn't legally count, where is the money going to come from? This brings us to the $58 billion elephant in the room.
The very large elephant.
Yeah. Senator Jerry Moran, the chairman of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, proposed a highly debated alternative. Utilizing $58 billion in projected savings generated by the VA's own upcoming rating schedule changes.
And to understand this proposal, we really have to pull back and look at the factual context of how the VA operates internally. By law, the Department of Veterans Affairs is required to periodically update its rating schedules.
They have to do this regularly.
Yes, exactly. The mandate is to ensure the criteria reflect modern medicine, modern science, and current standards of treatment. If medical technology advances to the point where a condition that was debilitating 30 years ago is now easily manageable, the rating schedule is legally supposed to adapt to reflect that new reality.
And the VA has 15 bodily systems in their rating schedule. They've already finalized updates for 11 of them.
Yeah, they've been working through it.
I guess federal bureaucracy moves at the speed of a dial-up modem, but they are slowly getting there. The two systems currently in the crosshairs, the ones generating this massive $58 billion in projected savings, are the auditory and respiratory schedules.
Specifically, we are talking about proposed changes to how tinnitus and sleep apnea are rated. And it is very, very important to set the record straight on the timeline here.
Yeah, let's clear that up.
This is a nonpartisan administrative process. The proposed changes were officially published in 2022 under the Biden administration. But the core medical evaluations and the internal agreement that updates were necessary actually began under the Trump administration.
So it spans multiple administrations?
Exactly. This is standard, ongoing agency modernization. It is not some sudden political maneuver.
Now, assuming the listener is already very familiar with how common these claims are, let's look at the macro implications. Currently, tinnitus is generally an automatic 10% rating, and sleep apnea with a prescribed CPAP machine is an automatic 50% rating.
Right, those are the standard ratings today.
But by around April 2027, the VA plans to eliminate tinnitus as a standalone claim entirely, and they are planning to drastically alter the criteria for that 50% sleep apnea rating. Why are they changing the medical logic on sleep apnea so severely?
The shift in medical logic comes down to the core purpose of VA disability compensation, which is to compensate for average earnings loss. The proposed criteria for sleep apnea shift the focus away from the mere presence of a medical device, the CPAP machine.
Right.
And instead, they focus on the actual economic impairment. The VA's new logic argues that if a CPAP machine is highly effective and completely resolves your residual daytime hypersomnolence, then your earning capacity is theoretically no longer impaired. Therefore, under the new rules, simply being prescribed a CPAP would no longer warrant an automatic 50% rating.
Okay, here is where I have to step in and push back on behalf of the listener. If I am sitting at home right now, and I rely on my 50% rating for sleep apnea or my 10% rating for tinnitus to pay my mortgage, hearing that the government is about to save $58 billion by changing these rules sounds absolutely terrifying.
Oh, I completely understand that.
Wait, are they taking away veterans' current benefits to pay for this new legislation? Because if they are, that sounds like a terrible, dangerous precedent.
I am so glad you brought that up because it is the #1 misconception fueling anxiety in the veteran community right now. The answer is an unequivocal no. Nobody is taking away current benefits from any veteran who already holds those ratings.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, these rating changes are entirely prospective.
Prospective, meaning they will only apply to brand new claims filed after the final rule actually goes into effect.
Yes, exactly. Anyone currently receiving benefits for tinnitus or sleep apnea is completely grandfathered in. Your current rating is protected under these rule changes.
That is huge to clarify.
It really is. Furthermore, even after the final rules are published in the Federal Register, there will be a designated legal grace period where veterans can still apply under the old criteria before the door completely shuts on the legacy ratings.
That is a massive relief. But it brings up another vital piece of the puzzle. You're pointing out that these changes to tinnitus and sleep apnea, they aren't happening because of the Take Care of America's Veterans Act.
No, not at all. This is the absolute core reality of the current Senate debate. The VA is executing these changes to the auditory and respiratory schedules, regardless of whether the legislative package passes or fails.
Or completely separate tracks.
Exactly. The rating update is an internal agency mandate driven by medical modernization. It is not a legislative mandate being forced by Congress just to pay for something else.
So let me make sure the mechanics of this are crystal clear. The VA is going to execute this rule change around April 2027.
Most likely, yes.
And when they do, fewer new veterans entering the system will qualify for that 50% sleep apnea rating or the 10% tinnitus rating. Over the coming years, that naturally means the VA will spend roughly $58 billion less than they originally projected.
The savings are going to happen automatically, basically as a mathematical byproduct of the VA updating its medical criteria.
It's like finding out your monthly household bills are dropping by $500 because you finally paid off your car loan. The money is freed up regardless.
That's a great way to put it.
But if you don't actively take that $500 and manually move it into a specific savings account, it just gets absorbed into your general checking account. It gets spent on groceries, gas, or whatever, and it effectively disappears.
Right, it just vanishes into your everyday spending.
So the federal government is about to save $58 billion from these VA medical updates.
That is a brilliant analogy, and it captures exactly what is happening on the Senate floor right now. We recently saw this exact scenario play out with the VA's rating changes to the digestive system, specifically regarding GERD.
Oh, right, the GERD changes.
Yeah. The VA updated the medical rules. It prospectively saved the government a significant amount of money going forward, but nobody in Congress legally earmarked those savings. Consequently, that money just evaporated back into the general Treasury ecosystem.
Wow.
It was absorbed and spent somewhere else in the vast federal budget.
It didn't go back to veterans.
No, it did not. So the ultimate choice facing advocates and lawmakers right now is a structural one. Do they slam their fists on the table and demand that this $58 billion, money that was originally budgeted and projected to be spent on veterans anyway, is legally captured and forced to be reinvested directly back into funding the Take Care of America's Veterans Act?
Meaning they use that specific $58 billion to act as the CBO-approved offset. They use it to finally pay for the Major Richard Starr Act, the survivor benefits, and the rural mental health access.
That is the proposal.
Okay.
The alternative is that they let that $58 billion evaporate into the general treasury, exactly like the GERD savings did. And they leave those 60 pieces of critical veteran legislation stalled indefinitely, simply because they cannot find another mandatory spending offset that the Congressional Budget Office will agree to.
That completely reframes the entire argument. The debate we are seeing online is often framed as, should we cut sleep apnea to pay for the Major Richard Starr Act?
Right, which is just not true.
It is factually incorrect. The reality is sleep apnea and tinnitus criteria are changing anyway.
Exactly.
The real debate on Capitol Hill is, since that $58 billion is being saved by the VA regardless, should we legally force the government to spend it on other veteran priorities rather than losing it to the general treasury forever?
You've hit the nail on the head. That is the true legislative and mechanical reality of the July 29th debate.
Okay, this has been an incredible amount of dense policy, so let's make sure we distill this down for you. Let's recap the top 3 key takeaways from the sources we've unpacked today.
Sound good.
Number 1, the Take Care of America's Veterans Act is a massive, incredibly important package that includes the Major Richard Starr Act and vital community care expansions. But it is currently completely paralyzed over strict federal PAYGO rules because the CBO rejected using discretionary DoD funds as an offset.
That's right. And number 2, the VA is moving forward with its legally mandated modernizations to its rating schedules. This will prospectively change the medical criteria for how tinnitus and sleep apnea are rated, likely taking effect around April 2027. By doing so, the government will save roughly $58 billion over the next decade.
And number 3, current veterans receiving these benefits will not lose them. You are grandfathered in. The current debate in the Senate is solely about whether to capture those future structural savings and legally mandate they be reinvested into other critical veteran programs rather than letting them evaporate into the general treasury.
Exactly. And, with all of this structural change on the horizon, there is one highly practical step you can take right now to protect yourself.
Yeah, let's give them some actionable advice.
If you are listening to this, I strongly encourage you to review your current medical records. If you have already been diagnosed with conditions like sleep apnea or tinnitus related to your service, but you just haven't gotten around to filing a claim yet, you need to consider submitting your VA Form 210966, your intent to file, right now.
Right now.
Yes. Do this well before any of these prospective changes take effect.
Because that locks in your place in line under today's medical criteria.
It does. An intent to file gives you up to a full year to gather your medical evidence while legally preserving your effective date under the current rating criteria. As always, make sure you verify your current eligibility and the exact requirements through official VA sources or by working with an accredited veteran service officer. Do not wait until 2026 or 2027 to start looking into this.
That is fantastic, actionable advice. Control what you can control. But zooming out, looking at all these sources today, leaves you with a tough, almost philosophical question. If modern medicine eventually cures or easily manages most of these conditions, the VA's compensation budget will naturally shrink over time.
It's bound to happen.
Right, but should a shrinking VA budget mean we just spend less on veterans overall? Or should that money automatically pivot to emerging complex issues like toxic exposure and burn pits? Something to think about as this debate continues.
It's the central question of how we value the changing nature of the injuries sustained in service. Having a level-headed discussion about these structural realities is the best way we can advocate for each other.
We want to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think the VA savings should be legally earmarked to pay for things like the Major Richard Starr Act, or do you have concerns about the specific method of federal funding? Let us know your experiences or questions in the comments below. Thank you for watching Veterans Briefing. Take care, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next episode.